Number 5, the Illinois Fighting Illini. They burst through last year to a 10-3 record. It was an incredible jump forward in results for Bielema and the boys. Luke Altmaier, who I doubted this time last year in the previews, he stopped turning the football over. He, other than the Oregon game, but over the course of the season, was a lot more efficient. Took care of the football. I love the physicality with which Illinois played. They threw the football very well last year. They had some really nice wide receivers that I feel like a lot of the country just kind of completely underrated because you're not used to Illinois throwing the ball to electric wide receivers. This year, though, the question is, can they duplicate that success? Can they handle maybe the lack of oxygen up here as they climb closer and closer towards the sun? Or they're number 5 in our contenders ranking right now. The Jimmies and the Joes obviously think the world of them. But when you're talking about being compared to the likes of Oregon and Michigan and Penn State and Ohio State, the teams that are obviously going to be in front of you, I'm curious to hear how you guys think that the Illini stack up here in 2025.
This is another team where I feel like going into preview season, I was expecting to do my research and see, okay, here's the flaw everyone's just kind of glossing over. Like Illinois has been getting all this love from February through June, but here's a very obvious flaw that we're glossing over. I don't think Illinois has a fatal flaw necessarily, and I am more on board with Illinois than I was when I started the research process on them. The biggest question to me, you hinted at it, Mitch, is who replaces Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin at wide receiver? And if you had that on your bingo card for Illinois, that they need to replace a dynamic receiving duo, if you haven't been paying attention to their football team the last couple of years, you might be really surprised by that. But outside of Ohio State, it was maybe the second or third best wide receiver tandem in the whole conference last year. And they're both out the door, obviously, off to the NFL, and they'll need to find replacement receivers for them. That's the biggest question mark to me. Can that offense be dynamic without those two set in stone guys? And I also need to see the offensive line improve to fully buy into them as a playoff contender. All 5 starters are back. That's a big deal, but they allowed 32 sacks last year. So It's not necessarily, obviously continuity and growth and development are huge on the offensive line. That's naturally going to happen when guys play together for another year, but that's a unit that's definitely got to step up in my mind for me to buy them as a true playoff contender and not just a borderline higher bowl team.
I had the same questions. As far as the wide receiving core goes, I feel like to me that's more answered by what I know about the guys that they plugged in with the portal. So Hudson Clement from West Virginia comes over. I love him. He's absolutely my personal favorite. I wrote about him in the written preview. Justin Bowick comes over from Ball State, almost 400 yards of receiving last year, a couple of touchdowns with him. And then they've got some solid production at tight end as well. Now, is that Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin? Probably not. But I think the runway is there to get the passing game in a very competitive spot. You mentioned the offensive line, though, and that was, without a doubt, the number one question when I looked at this team, because those 32 sacks were the worst mark in the Big Ten last year. Specifically, 15 of those sacks, guys, came in their losses to Penn State, to Oregon, and to Minnesota. Altmaier was running for his life when he faced an NFL-esque defensive line. The offensive line just had no answer to it. And so if that continues this year, we'll get to their schedule in just a second, that's going to prevent them from being a true contender in my mind. If they can build that wall, though, which we've seen Bielema teams be very good along the offensive line, right? I mean, his time at Arkansas, it was throw a stone and you were going to hit a future NFL All-Pro is what it felt like. So if Illinois can get back to winning in the trenches, establishing that run game, and then protecting their quarterback off of that, I really feel like Illinois has a good chance to be very, very good and be a team that could knock off an Oregon or knock off an Iowa, opponents of that ilk. Garrett, also on the defense, they had to rebuild the defense again. They had to go through the portal. Aaron Henry is the defensive coordinator there. Secondary is all back, including cornerback Xavier Scott, who's an all Big Ten selection last year. They've got some veteran linebackers that return, but the defensive line needs James Thompson and Kurt Neal, both coming from Wisconsin, to play big roles. They've got a transfer from Florida State that comes in. Defense allowed just 21 points and some change last year. With those changes, especially in the trenches, do you expect that to improve, regress? Where do you feel like the Illini net out on the defensive side?
It's tough to figure out just because they're bringing in so many new pieces on the defensive line. Of course, you'd rather replace guys on the defensive line because they can kind of just play as solo as opposed to on the offensive line where they got to play as a unit, right? And by the way, I do think the 5 guys coming back is going to be a massive net positive for them, that they've played together, they know how to play with each other, and they're going to get a whole off season to, kind of check some notes and do that. So that, by the way, just should be a lot better in my book. But no, I think, look, when you bring back a lot of your defense in the back part as well, and you're playing teams, kind of early on in this schedule, like Indiana, like USC, like Ohio State, you're happy to have some of those teams earlier who are, more of the pass happier teams at times, and who are going to try to throw the ball down because you've got a secondary that's played together before. You've got a secondary who knows the scheme, they know their assignments, and should make it easy to kind of weather that early. The big key for me for that defense is going to be, are they going to be on the field a bunch? Because, kind of like we said, Altmaier stopped turning the ball over last season, save one game. Is that going to be a trend that continues if he has to kind of force the ball to maybe a worse receiving core, right? It's nice when you have those guys down there you can trust and or, kind of live to fight to play the next down. If he has to start kind of forcing it to try to get some plays to happen downfield, or if they kind of clamp down on the run game a little bit, force them into bad situations, is he going to revert to his old self, or is he going to, stay responsible with the ball? That's a big thing for that defense as well. Is, you don't want to get, out over your skis. You don't want that experienced secondary running laps and getting winded by the time you hit that third and fourth quarter, because there's too many good teams that are going to make you pay for it. This is a good defense that should play really well. There's nothing about this defense that makes me afraid, that makes me think that we're going to, see massive regression. It's just something to keep an eye on with that defensive line and see if, they can kind of control a little bit of line of scrimmage. And then again, like I said, time of possession is going to be big for them as well.
Yeah, Trey, you're high on Gabe Jacas, who comes back off the edge. That's a nice piece that Illinois has. Certainly the pass rush, a guy that was,
I think, top 5 tacklers total are back too. So they definitely have a lot of pieces to work with on the defense.
Sure. So with that, we talked about Indiana having a softer schedule last year. This year, they kind of load up, right? Illinois, it seems like the opposite, where this year I think their schedule is actually rather forgiving. So they've got an over-under of 8.5, according to Vegas right now. To me, guys, the danger spots start in week 2 when they go to Wallace Wade Stadium to take on Duke. Trey, you talked about that in an earlier episode where I think you've got Illinois squarely on upset alert. Duke is a team that we're all very high on. I think we're going to echo all of those sentiments when we get to our ACC preview week as well. So it starts early in week 2. They've got a road trip to Indiana in week 4. They'll play USC for homecoming and then Ohio State on October 11th before their bye week. After that, they've got a road trip to Washington. They've got Rutgers, Maryland, at Wisconsin, and Northwestern. So certainly the toughest part of the schedule is up front, that first half of the season. If they can weather the storm, I think they can absolutely hit their over here, especially given what we feel like we know about Bielema and how he continues to build on teams year over year. I seem to trust Illinois to get to 9 wins, maybe even more so than I do Indiana this season.
I want to, but then you look at year over year their results, and it's 5-7, 8-5, 5-7, 10-3. Got to avoid the fallback year, and I think they do have the schedule to do it. I think you're right, but there's just some landmines, man, that make me just a little antsy. That Duke game that you highlighted, going to Washington is not going to be easy. Wisconsin, I know that that's going to be the end of an absolutely brutal run for Wisconsin that we highlighted on an earlier episode this week. But Camp Randall's not an easy place to play. They played Oregon very close in November last year, even at the end of a disappointing season. So just a lot of landmines and not a lot of obvious Sharpie in losses, maybe Ohio State. And that's probably it from a standpoint of we're pretty sure they're going to lose that game. But it's just, there's a lot of difficult situations that they could find themselves in this year. And just running the gauntlet in those is always going to be difficult.
I think Illinois fans may share a little bit of that pessimism because, to your point, Illinois has never made it to a bowl game following an 8 or more win season. They've always had a losing year right after whatever success they just followed that up with, right? The average to above average season immediately leads to disappointment the next year throughout the history of their program. So you certainly could take that path and go, well, for whatever reason, Illinois is snake bit. And I think those landmines would be the exhibit A for people that are going to take that. I think the offensive line can't be much worse than it was last year. And even if you do have some regression to the passing game, I know they lost Josh McCray, is that his name, to Georgia. That was the drama this last week of whether or not Bielema was calling out Georgia for tampering with him and et cetera. So, there are questions at certain positions for this team. But man, I just feel like the way they ended 2024, the way they beat South Carolina, the way that they've been putting together a team, like if not this team, then when, right? So I'm gonna say initially I was on the under train, but I'm gonna reverse course and I'm gonna say why not this year? Let's go 9-3.
Yeah, this is a team that for me is really easy to believe in. And again, I kind of mentioned it when we were talking about Indiana, but this is one of the two contender teams that brings their quarterback back from last season. And sometimes that's just because it's the guy you have. But when it's a guy who's not turning the ball over and who can run your offense and who can take care of the football, that's what I'm looking for, right? You're not going to be in that many bad spots. You do have to go to Indiana, so that's kind of a tough spot on the road right there. But you play Ohio State at home. At the very least, you're not going into a hostile environment with that one. Not picking them to win it, but at the very least, you're not, putting too much extra stress on that offense with the crowd noise, with the environment, and everything else that goes along with it. And look, for me, this is a team that if they drop to Indiana and Ohio State, I don't really see a whole lot of other teams on that schedule that tell me they have to lose that game. I trust this team to get it done. I trust this team to figure it out through the course of the season. They got a lot of experienced leadership on it. This is one of those teams that I think could have the really good year this year and then fall off next year just from talent loss and everything else that could be going on there. But this year is the year to get it done. Like this year, you said it, Mitch, it's the year to get it done. If it's not going to be this team, it may never happen for Illinois. I think this is a 10-2 football team. This feels real 10-2 to me. They should be in the mix for a college football playoff spot towards the end of the season. Again, I trust the quarterback to get it done. I just don't think they're going to drop too many games where they're in a tough spot where they go, oh, like look at Washington, right? Like if you go to Washington, that's a possible upset. But I think that Luke Altmaier takes care of the football and gets him a win there. You can do the same thing with Wisconsin. You go to Wisconsin. That's a tough spot to play, but I trust Altmaier to go get it done on the road. So I think this is a team that I really believe in and trust to take care of the football, to take care of their game, play within themselves, and end up competing towards the end of the year.
Two little nuggets before we move on, if I may.
Yep.
5-1 in one possession games last year was Illinois. That's
Sure.
Always a red flag for me, just because that tends to even out over the course. Bielema as a coach has not had back-to-back 10-win seasons since 2010, 2011 when he was at Wisconsin. So it's been quite a while. I feel like I'm coming down really negative on Illinois. I think their defense is going to be legit, like maybe the best defense in the conference this year. But I want to believe so bad. And I think they're going to win 8 or 9 games. I just think the playoff hype is throwing me off and
sure,
probably just making me want to tap the brakes on just the college football universe, penciling them in there.
And I think that's fair. I think, listen, take that, Fox News. We've got one playoff pick. We've got one kind of fence rider in my 9-3, and then we've got a possible 8-4. So I'd say that's fair and balanced across the board right there. That's why you come to the 3 Tech Pod, right? Indiana will be a fascinating case for so many reasons, as we've just highlighted.